Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 30th of May 2025. We'll start with the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, or the usual caveats apply, of course, and you can find them in the description to the video below. 1,140 personnel lost, that's a bit of an uptick by about 100 lost soldiers there. One tank, two troop-carrying AFVs, typically low, considering what we've seen over the last 3 or 4 days. 35 artillery systems over, it's about 1.5 times the daily average. So that's fairly decent. One multiple launch rocket system and one anti-aircraft warfare system. Haven't seen anything in those categories for a couple of days, really. 74 vehicles and fuel tanks, below 100. Still a fairly decent number, but much lower than we are used to. So I think just in general, we are seeing lower numbers this week, but some fairly hefty personnel losses there and some artillery systems taken out too. So we're going to look at Jakub Yonovsky's Russian lost list. Although some of these are older Russian losses, there are considerably more than the Ukrainians. 74 in total Russian losses, where the Ukrainians have 39. But as mentioned, it could well be that that most of the losses in today's updates are old, he does say. So there is that. Quite a few tanks there. Really a high number of tanks. I'm assuming that that's just looking at some older losses, as mentioned in that category, because that would be an insanely good day for the Ukrainians. Although it's not just a single day, he tootsies up, brings out lists every 2, sometimes 3 days or so. You've got another, so 10 tanks, unknown tanks there, and then the rest. I mean, that's well over 20, could be on to 30 tanks being lost there. Okay, then a lot of BMPs, BMDs, BTRs, and then when we come down to the high value losses, not too much to see there really. It goes from artillery pieces onto some Orlans and Zalas, Supercan, these reconnaissance drones. So 74 pieces of kit, okay, pretty decent there, but a lot of them are old. With the Ukrainian losses, most of these losses in today's are also old for the Ukrainians. So a bit of a catch-up. There's a Leopard 2A4 in there. Usual bank of mobility vehicles for the Ukrainian Strikers, Bushmaster, Max Pros, FFG MRAPs, QPs, Senators, Humvees. A lot of Western-provided mobility vehicles there. YPR 765. That's the Dutch upgrade of the M113. Nothing too much to get worried about other than maybe the Leopard 2A4 in there. Now, Syrskyi has said that over 89,000 Russian targets have been struck in May using drones. That's a massive number just in and of itself. That seems intuitively a huge number. The question is, what is that in comparison to the Russian strikes on the Ukrainian targets? What is it in comparison to previous months? It's fairly difficult to get excited about a claim when you don't really have the context. When you divide that over 30, you're looking at sort of 3,000 strikes a day, 3,000 targets struck. But of course, that could include a tank getting hit 10 times by drones. So quite often they have to use multiple drones to take out single pieces of material. Then you've got individual humans. So when you see 1,140 people killed in a single day, an awful lot of those are going to be individual drones on individual humans. We've seen that 1-for-1 ratio a lot throughout the recent period of the war. So, considering they're losing 1,140 people a day, a lot of those 3,000 hits a day are going to be concerned with individual soldiers. Then you're going to have bunkers, ammo depots, buildings, so on and so forth. So that 3,000 a day is good. It sounds impressive, but actually that's probably what you would expect given the sheer volume of drones they are using a day and given the loss stats that we are seeing on a daily basis. So that kind of fits in. It's a useful data point, but it's difficult to get excited about it when you don't know where it sits within comparable data. Okay. Senior Lieutenant Viktor Samoylov, rocket artillery battery commander, was killed in Russia's Belgorod region. As a former Sevastopol Nakimovsky district official, he backed Crimea's annexation in 2014, fought with the Bars unit from 2022, and signed a contract with Russia's MOD in 2024. He's been eliminated. Now, talking about the bomb that went off yesterday, initially thought to be a grenade, that went off to kill the Russian army major Zal Gutierv. He was responsible for stuff going on in Mariupol. Deputy Mayor of Stavropol now, former Russian army major, reported to be... right, so what we are going to look at now is some of the details concerning this. So actually, let's go to this one first before we look at some of the details concerning the bomb. So the killer of the deputy mayor in Stavropol, former Russian army major. I'm going to pause that there because he's just about to explode. So you got this guy coming up to meet the mayor there. Now, this man, the killer of the deputy mayor of Stavropol, former Russian army major Zal Gutierv, is reported to have been a man whom he met on a gay dating website. The man may not have known he was carrying a bomb, and that's where it gets a little bit funky. Apparent details from the police investigation have been reported by the VCHK OGPU Telegram channel. According to the channel, Gutierv met Penkov on a gay dating website. The two were said to have been meeting for the first time in a discreet nighttime rendezvous. During the investigation, explicit correspondence was found where they sent each other naked photos, etc. The deputy head of the city had already invited his new acquaintance to spend time together, but each time the meeting had to be cancelled due to Gutiev's business trips until last night. Zal Gutierv and Nikita Penkov had agreed on the meeting place in advance. As soon as they got close, an explosion occurred. According to preliminary data, the ID was in Nikita Penkov's shoulder bag. Inside the bomb were fragmentation elements, balls for an air gun. Penkov, judging by preliminary data, was hired by unknown persons to collect dirt on Gutierv and supplied with special equipment that transmits a picture. An IED was installed in the special equipment. The channel reports that Russian security forces believe that Penkov was recruited by an as yet unknown handler to expose Gutierv as a hidden representative of the LGBT community banned in the Russian Federation. Penkov had previously been employed by the Federal Penitentiary Service until April 2025. His mother urged him to apply for a police job back home, but he declined as he told her he had found himself a good and highly paid job and is already doing an internship. While nobody has yet claimed responsibility for Gutiev's death, Russia and Ukraine have accused each other of recruiting their own citizens via Telegram or other channels to carry out sabotage attacks, often on the pretense of working for their own side security forces. This has sometimes led to people being used as unwitting suicide bombers, as in the case of several Ukrainian teens recruited by the Russians to attack Ukrainian targets, or the Russian truck driver recruited by Ukrainians to carry out a massive bomb carrier onto the Kerch Bridge in October 2022. Okay, then evidence reportedly from the scene of the assassination of the deputy mayor of Stavropol, former Russian army major Gutierv, suggests that the bomb which killed him and his companion Nikita Penkov was remotely detonated. A circuit board reportedly found at the scene by Russian police investigators is shown in a photograph published on that Telegram channel. According to the channel, quote, the part is identical to those used in mechanisms for opening a barrier by remote control or by phone. Batteries were also installed in the explosive device. Fragments were found at the scene, and a bomb was filled with fragmentation elements, bullets from an air gun. The explosion could have been carried out remotely, either from a short distance or using a GSM signal. The find lends further credence to the supposition that Penkov was an unwitting assassin. As previously reported, he is said to have been recruited by an unknown handler, ostensibly to expose Gutierv as a hidden representative of the LGBT community. Gutierv was involved in mass killings in Mariupol in Ukraine in 2022. Penkov is said to have been provided with an IED disguised as recording equipment, which he carried in his shoulder bag to a rendezvous with Gutierv that he arranged through a gay dating website. So fascinating intricacies of this sabotage. Anton here, Shekovstov, says that, so Gutierv, Russian war criminal who commanded air operations during the capture of Mariupol, was, all the same details there. The equipment was not for recording. However, it was a bomb, and when the two met, the device detonated, killing both men. Okay, moving on. We have occupied Yanakiev in the Donetsk region. A fire broke out at a gas storage station. A pretty intense fire going on there. Now, that's a gas storage station. I don't know if that's been hit. This could be in the strikes section, but it's on fire. And either one assumes that's going to be sabotage or a drone strike or a missile strike. I don't know what the detail is, but that's a pretty big fire going on there, by all accounts. Now, Anton Gerashenko says Russian media is reporting explosions in Russian Vladivostok. Vladivostok is a port on the eastern seaboard of Russia. It's absolutely miles away from Ukraine. It's about as far away as you can get in Russia. So there's not going to be anything to do with Ukrainian strikes, but there appear to be explosions going off in the area of a marine training ground. It's reported that the road in the area to the incident was blocked. Eyewitnesses reported a helicopter flying over the site. Special and emergency services arrived on the scene and the area was cordoned off. So something's going on in Vladivostok. Details of the incident remain undisclosed. According to some local residents, drones were reportedly spotted. However, the Regional Anti-Terrorist Commission reported that the threat has been neutralized and a set of security measures have been implemented. I mean, if that was a drone going all the way over to the east of Russia, then that says everywhere in Russia is now vulnerable. But I would think that was unlikely. However, the Regional Anti-Terrorist Commission, reported it had been neutralized. Russian Telegram channels wrote that 2 vehicles covered with tarpaulin were at the site. According to open sources, Desantnaya Bay may be a training ground for the Russian Pacific Fleet Marines. It's involved in fighting in Ukraine, that unit. So that's happened. Okay, on to distant strikes. And we know very little, really, of strikes other than in Kharkiv. But the rest of Ukraine, I'm unaware of any damage as of yet. And I'm not aware of anything particularly going on inside Russia other than some explosions last night in Kursk. So we'll start with the General Staff infographic. 92 threats sent into Ukraine. We have 56 drones were taken out. So 56 out of 90 drones. 26 shot down, 30 suppressed by electronic warfare or lost in location. So that gives quite a large number, 34 out of 90. Again, we're looking at a third of the drones being, just over a third of the drones being, or getting through, not being taken out. And that is a really high proportion. But I have very little knowledge of the damage they've done. And I reported this yesterday in one of my videos. It might be my frontline video. My frontline video is worth watching from yesterday. I think it's important. Things are not looking good in Pokrovsk. Things are looking challenging up in Sumy. Things are looking very challenging down the Kharkiv direction. So, and Liman direction as well is also challenging. So things are looking pretty hairy for the Ukrainians at the moment. And the Russians appear to be using a lot of their drones, I think, closer to the front line. I've said that the Ukrainians should be using their drones on the front line, personally myself. I think they should just be slamming in their drones on the Russian forces all over the place, but particularly in the Pokrovsk direction as they're going up to Konstantinivka, where they have where they're close to the over the T0504 highway and a junction there. Now, the Russians, I think, are using those drones on cities and towns close to the front line. Your Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, Druzhkivka, Konstantinivka, I think, are probably receiving a lot of these. When we don't hear about them from a kind of social media, large scale, the sources I look at, actually, if you drill down to the smaller sources reporting what's going on in these certain places. I know Pierre sent me some details of explosions happening in those aforementioned places yesterday. I think that they are raining hell down on some of those towns very close to the front line there. in that semicircle of that agglomeration of urban areas in the Seversk area. So, yeah, it could be that a lot of those drones hit areas near there. 2 Iskander M or KN-23 ballistic missiles were sent, and neither of them were shot down. I don't have the details of where they hit. Now, we do understand that the Russians hit the trolley bus depot in Kharkiv with Shahids. 2 people injured, 1 trolley bus was completely destroyed, 18 others suffered varying degrees of damage, and more than 30 residential buildings were also damaged. So massive civilian infrastructure attack. Again, this is heinous attacks on civilians in Ukraine, and it appears to be targeted. Several Shahids going for this one place, so it's unlikely to be a result of, say, air defense taking out the Shahids or electronic warfare sending them off course. This looks like a targeted attack on the Kharkiv civilian infrastructure. 8 people injured in a Russian attack also on Vasilyev Gutierv. So some more images here early this morning, says Tim White at the end of yesterday's thread I wrote of an attack on Izmail in the southwest of Ukraine. So that's another place that actually I forgot that. There were explosions reported last night at Izmail. Izmail's on the Danube River. That is essentially the border between Romania and Ukraine. And Izmail, there's a couple of ports there, Izmail and Remy. Izmail, it's been targeted previously a number of times, and it's where the drones often go over the border, land on the other side of the river. We've heard that Romania, I think the other night there were rumours that Romania shot down some drones. They've now passed a law in their parliament that they can do that. But anyway, so that happened in Izmail. Strike drones destroyed a branch of Nova Poshta at the town, which is an important port on the Danube. Nova Poshta is a really integral part of Ukrainian society. It operates under incredibly stressful conditions and delivers stuff just to the front lines almost. It's going to be one of these success stories of the war when you learn about just how incredible they are. Yes, so I thought they were pictures of the trolley bus depot. But nonetheless, Kharkiv is where a lot of the information is coming from, but then obviously Izmail too. Claims that a couple of small explosions reported in Russia's Tula province. That was last night, but no real details of strikes into Russia other than, as I say, alarms going off in Kursk last night, and an explosion took place there, but have no details about that. Tim White says now hearing 1 person was injured, 27-year-old man driving his car at the time of the attack. Russia says the falling debris caused his shrapnel wounds and also damaged Kursk City Hospital. So they're saying that's an explosion in mid-air that caused debris to fall, but unsure of any real damage done in Russia at the time, at the moment. So it could be that the Ukrainians didn't send particularly any or many drones into Russian airspace last night. Satellite imagery has come out showing the aftermath of the strike on the Kronstadt in the Moscow region. 8 impacts are visible. The facility was involved in developing combat drones. This was a strike from the night before, and there was imagery of a drone sort of going down on one of the buildings and hitting the roof. So the fact that there's 8 holes on the roof there is no surprise. We definitely saw one of those. But yes, someone says, are you sure all the dark spots are at the crossing of structural lines? So it could be a hell of a coincidence. So it might not be that. There are people claiming it could be otherwise, but there was definitely one explosion, at least one explosion on the top of that building, as according to video evidence. And now we move on to the last section, other bits and pieces. 60,000 troops, 1 in 10 of Putin's entire Ukraine force, and I reported this in my frontline update, are now massing around Konstantinivka, according to Euromaidan Press. It's Ukraine's last major settlement before Kramatorsk, Donetsk, Oblast final defense line. So those are the towns I was just talking about with regard to, the strikes that are taking place. So you've got Cheziv Yar, you've got Toretsk, New York, you have Prokrovsk over here, and you have this sector where they've got across the T0504 highway there, and they're moving up to Konstantinivka from the south. where they've struggled to get there from the east, stopped at Chasiv Yar, and they struggled to get further from Tourette's. They are just prodding and probing all along this whole front line until they find a weakness, and the weakness was here, and they eventually exploited that. They're doing motorbike attacks, they're doing all sorts. So this is the area I think that the Ukrainians should absolutely shellac with guided glide bombs, with MLRS, with Gimlers, with one-way attack drones. Send them at the Russian troops on the front line, just blitz this whole area, because they need to be stopped there, because all of these towns and cities, Druskivka, Slovyansk, Kramatorsk, all of these are now under threat due to this going on. Anyway, so the Russians know this, and the claim here is that 60,000 Russian troops are amassed there. Why is this industrial town? Why does it matter? Russia spent a year bleeding out at Chasiv Yar and Pokrovsk with little to show for it. Their generals found Ukraine's thinnest defensive gap, and they're betting everything on breaking through here. The pattern is already clear. 150 Russian motorcycle troops hit one village. Almost all were killed or wounded. More Russians immediately followed behind them. This is how Putin fights for every yard toward his primary war objective. Ukraine sees what's coming. 12 of their best brigades now hold a 30-kilometer defensive arc around the town. The stage is set for one of the war's biggest battles. Next stop, if Russia breaks through, Kramatorsk. Now, there's a lot of doom and gloom we could have about this. In fact, Pierre was talking to me yesterday about seeing the whole of Donetsk, the whole of Donbass really be taken by autumn of this year. I'm a little more skeptical because the Russians have spent 15 months getting from Avdiivka to where they are now, sort of 30 miles or so, at insane losses. Now, if you say, okay, that's going to happen again, it'll take another 15 months, not another sort of 4 months. Or even 6 months. I just think the Russians, they could take an awful lot of this. They could get to Kramatorsk, but it's going to come at insane costs to them. And I think we can expect similar. Although there is the question is, what's the difference now between previously and Avdiivka? The difference is that the Russians are doing a better job at hammering the Ukrainian logistics using FPV drones. So whether it be increased ranged drones or fiber optic drones that are being used much more effectively by the Russians, that is a difference between the Russians and the Ukrainians from when they broke through at Avdiivka. But of course, the Ukrainians have their own drone capabilities and capacities too. So it could well be, though, that this is where the biggest battles for in this war will take place in the coming months. But we also hear that Russians are just 27 kilometers from Sumi's grey zone. This is the buffer zone that Putin said he wants is rapidly expanding on the northern borders. Now, the problem here for Ukraine and in Kharkiv is that we have seen the Russians in Kherson do the human safari. This looks like a dry run for Sumy and Kharkiv. They are now close enough to send drones into these major cities and cause absolute freaking havoc for the Ukrainian civilians there. And I'm really, really worried. Kharkiv is the second biggest city. And, if that becomes a ghost town, how will that affect Ukraine economically and morally? In terms of morale. So according to Deep State Monitoring Group, Russian forces are now only 27 kilometers away from the Ukrainian city of Sumy, advancing from the so-called grey zone. Moscow is actively pushing toward the buffer zone that Putin recently declared as part of his military objectives. And so these are slightly worrying times for the Ukrainians. They need to be able to force the Russians back. But, these are huge frontline areas because this is the entire border. The entire border is in the north is now an active front line. Right. And then more worries for the Ukrainians being reported here by Euromaidan Press. Crowds have surrounded a draft office vehicle after an alleged beating incident in Ukraine's Khmelnytsky Oblast. Around 100 residents of Kamianets-Podilsky surrounded a draft office vehicle after witnesses said officials beat a young man and struck a woman with the car. with the car. So I don't know what's gone on there, but there are going to be, as morale is hit, as things get more difficult, and Ukraine desperately need people to serve, and you're going to have draft dodgers. Now, remember that it seems really officious if you're going to bundle people into the back of a van to send them off to fight. But you've got to understand that these people are seemingly, one would think in these situations, are breaking the law, right? So they have been called up for the draft. They're in the age bracket. They are needed to defend their country. So if they are evading draft, then they are breaking the law. And in the same way that you would expect a criminal to be bundled in the back of a police van, like you would expect people who are evading draft to have similar, they're not going to walk up to them and ask them politely to come with them, and then they say no, and they go, okay, well, on your way then. You say, right, well, okay, we're going to have to now arrest you and take you. So things like this will happen, and they've happened throughout the war. The shame is that they get used as ammunition by the Russians and pro-Russians, but obviously some issue has happened here that's not good news for Ukrainian PR. Now, on the other hand, talking about bad PR for one side or another, this is bad PR for the Russians, and it involves what's that term? Oh yeah, war crimes, children's gulag. In fact, this is kind of what Putin and the children's minister have had, why they've had an arrest warrant put on their head by the International Criminal Court. Children's Gulag, says Mark McKinnon, how a Canadian-funded project is mapping Russia's network of camps where abducted Ukrainian children are being held and helping to bring some of them home. So Mark McKinnon has written a piece in the Globe and Mail. Satellite data sheds light on Russia's modern-day gulags for Ukrainian children. So that's worth a little look. And here we see yet another Russian POW, this one captured on a southern front with a Nazi tattoo with the inscription Rus. Tell me you are Russian without saying you are Russian. So this guy has like swastikas and the German eagle and Rus as well tattooed. So it's clear it's a Russian Nazi. So every time you hear the Russians go, oh, these Ukraine Nazis, just show them videos like this and say, yeah, just let's wonder who really are the Nazis here. Okay, analysts reporting that Russian tanker has been forced off by Poland. A Russian-owned tanker, the Sun, was detected trying to drag its anchor through the Poland-Sweden 600-gigawatt power cable. Poland sent a fighter to buzz the tanker, and a fast-moving patrol ship scared the tanker off. Poland made it clear it will not accept such behaviour. Good stuff from Poland. That's what we want, strength there. Now, briefly, news reports that Russia has provided North Korea with a Pantsir air defense system. It's part of a payment for, they've supposedly received like 100 ballistic missiles. There's another report coming through. So they've really received an awful lot of stuff from North Korea, including voluminous quantities of artillery ammunition. Part of their payment clearly is a Pantsir air defense system, electronic warfare equipment, and other forms of military assistance. But the problem for Russia is that this is a clear violation of UN sanctions. Since November 2024, Moscow has transferred at least one mobile Pantsir air defense system and one combat vehicle of the same class to Pyongyang, according to a report by Multilateral Sanctions Monitoring Team, MSMT, which was distributed by South Korea's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The findings are based on intelligence data and other classified information, as well as input from independent research institutes. But the question is, what is the UN going to do about this? How the frick do these guys get to sit on the UN Security Council? It's just, I go back to all the videos we've had, all the two videos that I've had with Talaria where we discuss stuff like this, because, sanctions are pointless. The UN is pointless if they don't do anything. If they just sit there and allow Russia to run roughshod over their sanctions and resolutions and whatnot. It's infuriating. These guys are like toothless worms. Unless they do something, actually do something about this. I want to hear some reaction from the UN, and I want to see the UN mobilize into doing something about Russia. Anyway, moving on. The Economist thinks, an economist thinks the Russian economy is, quote, in a barely managed decline. This is in the Kiev Post here, which is worth having a look at. So that's it's a video. So let's just so Vladimir Lugovsky from the economics department at Indiana University discussing stuff with Jason J. Smart. I had an interview with him on the Kiev Post as well recently. But yes, I did a big thing on the economics yesterday, the economy in Russia, and even that was just not even touching the sides, barely dipping a toe into the Russian economy. So just a quick recap here. Despite Kremlin assurances the Russian economy remains stable and resilient, real data paints a very different and far more dangerous picture. Inflation is soaring, key industries are shrinking, and the ruble continues its sharp decline. At the center of the storm is a nation firmly financially stretched by war, isolated by sanctions, and increasingly disconnected from global markets. This professor warns that underlying economic fundamentals in Russia are eroding rapidly and could soon trigger widespread unrest. The Ukrainian-born economist, with multiple publications in American Economic Review and other leading journals, he pulls no punches. What you're seeing now is not just mismanagement, it's a controlled demolition of long-term viability. Rising inflation, frozen central bank rate, crumbling industrial base, and it could push Russia to the breaking point with implications for global security, military power, and Putin's hold on the country. So that would be a more damning look at the Russian economy. But I just generally think the Russian economy is in a much worse state than people understand. And I think the Russians are actually doing quite a good job of hiding that from the international community and giving a semblance of normality there. They're on a war footing, but I think it's a veneer, really, that covers up much greater, I think, what's the correct word? Degradation, maybe, of the Russian economy, a rot of the Russian economy. The banks are under strain, says the Kiev Insider. Foreign investment has vanished, and the regime is cannibalizing sovereign reserves to hold things together. The Russian government moves to bail out the banks. So, further information on the trouble in the Russian economy. According to the official decree signed in late April, Sberbank, VTB, Gazprombank, and Sovcombank will each receive massive long-term deposits from the state's sovereign fund, funds originally intended to safeguard Russia's pension system and future economic stability. And it lists there the amount of rubles they are getting. The National Wealth Fund, once touted as a buffer against global shocks, is now being quietly repurposed as a bailout mechanism for regime-linked financial institutions, many of which are under international sanctions and cut off from Western capital markets. The stated purpose of the deposits is to finance a major infrastructure project, but the structure of the funding tells a different story. The funds are being issued as subordinated deposits, maturing in 2049 with a symbolic interest rate of 1% on money actually used for project financing. Money not deployed can still earn higher interest via the central bank, giving recipient banks incentive to sit on the funds rather than spend them. The terms strictly prohibit early repayment or withdrawal, locking the government into long-term obligations with minimal oversight or flexibility. The move follows a legislative change passed in December 2024, which amended the budget code to allow the wealth fund money to be placed in commercial banks via subordinated deposits. Previously, such operations were restricted to VEB.RF, Russia's state development bank. The sudden expansion of access was swiftly followed by a wave of agreements benefiting the country's largest banks. And these latest transfers come amid what Kremlin calls financial closure of the rail project, a 1.788 trillion ruble infrastructure venture set to link Russia's two largest cities. While authorities insist the initiative is economically self-sustaining, key details remain undisclosed, including the exact terms of syndicated loans and the private interests involved in the two capitals consortium overseeing the project. As inflation climbs, regional budgets tighten, and the cost of war continues to mount, the Kremlin's decision to drain the NWF for long-term bank support highlights a growing desperation inside Russia's economic leadership. What was once a strategic reserve is now a lifeline for institutions too politically important to fail. So it looks like the banking sector is being bailed out by the National Wealth Fund. Now, just moving sideways onto a completely different topic really. A new US Air Force commissioned RAND report says that NATO and US forces would have a clear edge over Russia in a conventional war thanks to air power. The analysis finds that NATO would quickly gain air superiority, allowing it to strike Russian forces, disrupt logistics, and tilt the battlefield. I mean, my personal opinion is the Russian army and air force has been somewhat shafted by the war in Ukraine. They have really done themselves in, and the idea that they'd quickly go on to, if Ukraine capitulated, they would quickly go on to take these other countries, the Baltics, and start a fight with NATO, I think is fanciful to a degree, because I think NATO would absolutely get air superiority first and foremost. I mean, what the Russians have in their locker is, of course, nuclear saber rattling. But I think NATO would easily get one over the Russians if it actually came to it. I mean, what the Russians, it depends how much Ukraine capitulated, because the Russians would want to take control of the Ukrainian people and their defense, military and industrial complex and put that towards the Russian war machine. But I don't think that would ever happen realistically. So I think even, the strongest, if you were being as optimistic as possible for the Russians, the best outcome for the Russians I don't think you can expect a full Ukrainian capitulation where they suddenly get all of Ukraine. I don't think it's ever going to happen. So, these are interesting reports, but I think it would just be absolute insanity and suicide for Russia to pick another fight with someone else. I just don't think they're in a position to even easily have success in the Donbass, let alone elsewhere in Europe. Interesting that for his outstanding contribution to the development of international cooperation, President Duda has been awarded the chief of, that's the chief of GUR, the Ukrainian military intelligence, Krylo Budanov. Duda has awarded Budanov with one of the highest awards of Poland for foreigners, the Golden Officer's Cross of the Order for Merit to Poland. Sorry, a bit of a butchering of English here. He also awarded the Cavalier's Cross of the Order for Merit to Poland to the Deputy Chief of the GUR, Vadim Skibitsky. But I would love to have a medal like that. Look at that. That's pretty ostentatious, isn't it? Wow. So Budanov getting some props from Poland there. Good stuff. Anyway, that's enough from me. Oh, by the way, thank you to Ivan. I've got this Car for Ukraine, lovely green Car for Ukraine t-shirt, which on the back says, Ukraine, great capital of great people. It says on the back something akin to that. I need to remind myself exactly what it says. And I got some awesome badges for my badge display, display that I need to put up somewhere. So I've got a Car for Ukraine patch there and Car for Ukraine patch there. So thank you to Ivan for sending that stuff. And we've been helping Car for Ukraine on a couple of awesome different campaigns. Yes, so on the back it says Ukraine is the capital of great people. And that you can read that in several subtle different ways, and I love that. It's a capital of great people. Brilliant. Either, the capital itself is just great people, it's a capital of great people, or it's a capital of Ukraine and they're all great people, etc., etc. So thank you to Ivan for that, and thank you for Car for Ukraine for just doing an amazing job in supporting the troops on the front line, and thank you to you guys for supporting their efforts in supporting the troops on the front line. Awesome stuff. Take care, guys, and I'll speak to you soon.